Welcome to Creating a Historical Capsule Wardrobe. I'm going to do this in 3 parts. We're going to start with the purpose and brainstorming, and you guys already know who I am, the owner, operator, and designer seamstress of Stitch and Addiction. I'm so glad that you guys could make it today. My first question is what kind of historical events are you planning to attend? I'm looking at doing, there's an 1840 or a Victorian weekend that I'm really interested in later February. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to make it, but it's a whole weekend that I want to do. And then there is the University of North Carolina, I believe, at Chapel Hill. They host a Jane Austen event in the summer. So that's on my list of maybes. You can find your local costuming group a lot of times through Google or Facebook groups sometimes can help you find that. So that's how I was able to find the Dallas-Fort Worth one when I started looking for one years ago. And then the other thing, and this one is new this year, it's called the Costume Calendar. And if you just Google in the Costume Calendar, the website will pull up, and she takes events. People can submit their events and she curates them on a calendar for you, and it tells about them, gives links, and it's worldwide events. So it's not just in the US. So it's a pretty cool resource that's new. And the first thing that we really want to think about is, besides the events that you're attending, is what eras. And so it sounds like there's a lot of Jane Austen. Like with my Victorian weekend that I'm considering going to in February, you kind of have to maybe narrow it down. Do I really want to dress just Victorian, any era or any decade of Victorian, or do I want to narrow it down to a specific decade? And then think about the activities that you're going to be doing. You know, are you going to a tea? Are you going to a ball? Are you going to be outdoors? So if you have your workbook and you want to work along, now would be a good time to kind of jot those things down. Like, what era are you going to be wearing? What kind of activities are you going to be doing? And here's my example from the Victorian weekend. So this has got 6 events from Friday evening to Sunday afternoon. It starts with a reception at a haunted Victorian mansion, and her theme for that is something like haunted masquerade, I believe, is what her theme is. And then on Saturday, we're going to have a lunch at a local tavern. In the afternoon, we have a historical dance lesson. And then in the evening, we have the ball with a dinner. And then Sunday, we have a brunch in a renovated Victorian house. Believe it's from the 1870s, if I remember correctly. And then a walking tour of the historic town. It's in Navasota, Texas, down in the Houston area. So apparently that town has some good historic stuff to see. So if I was writing out my stuff in my workbook, I would jot down the historical era that I'm going to narrow it down to. So of course, I could do anything 1830s to 1890s since it's Victorian, but I really favor the 1840s, 1850s, and the 1860s. The other eras are really not my favorite. I just don't like the fashion from them very much. And I just wore 1860s for the Dickens on the Strand in December, so I'd really like to do 1840s for this weekend. The problem is, as you can see from the 2 pictures on here, I only have 2 dresses for 1840s, so I would have to do some sewing to make that possible, which is one of the reasons I'm not 100% sure I'm going to be able to make this event, but just for planning purposes. It's going to be in February, so I will need some outerwear to keep me warm. You never really know in Texas how cold it's going to be. We just went through a bunch of freezing temperatures. In late February, it could be freezing, it could be rainy, it could be, pretty temperate. So it will really just kind of depend, but I would like to be prepared at least, as well as like some sort of flannel or wool undergarments to keep me warm. So think about that too when you're planning, like not only what activities are you doing, but what kind of weather are you going to be experiencing in them? Are you going to need anything to help keep you warm that's period accurate? Because there's been times when I've gotten ready to go to an event and then I'm like, oh, it's cold and I don't have anything period to wear over this to keep me warm, right? So on the next page, you want to brainstorm what kind of garments do you already have. So for my purposes, I already have the blue summer day dress that I showed a picture of. It is 2 pieces, which is not exactly historically accurate because they would have actually made those in 1 piece, but I did it for flexibility's sake. And then I have the winter evening dress, the red plaid, also in 2 pieces. And then I have a cape. And that's really it that I have for outerwear for 1840s. So I would probably need to make at least a ball gown, if nothing else, to be able to get through the weekend. So As far as accessories, I have a lot more. I have a straw bonnet. I have a black silk bonnet. I have two different types of gloves. I have some the American Duchess Burnies, which is a flat lace-up shoe. I have some square toe ballet flats that would work, some earrings and necklace. And then I have two piano shawls that I actually just got that I'm super excited about adding to my 1840s or 1860s accessories. And then, of course, brainstorm your undergarments, whether you're going historically accurate with those or not. If you are, then you want to make sure you have all the pieces, which I have a chemise and drawers and plenty of petticoats and stockings. My corset is actually an 1860s corset, but I kind of cheat and use that for the 1840s, so I can get away with that at least. So that would be the next thing that you might want to jot down in your workbook is what do you already have? Because once you know what you have, then you can start to plan what you're going to need to get. Obviously, for undergarments, I might need another chemise if it's a whole weekend, right? The next page in your workbook is a event at a glance. So like here, I've plotted out the 3-day event that I really want to go to in Navasota, the Victorian event, and listed the activities that I'm going to be doing each one of those days. It kind of helps you start to narrow down, okay, I'm going to need this many different outfits. I'm going to have to at least change my accessories to look different for this versus this. Or like if you look at my day 2, obviously I'm going to have to change for the dinner and the ball. So I'm going to probably need 2 different outfits for that day, right? One to wear for the lunch and the dance lesson, and then one to wear for the dinner and the ball. So it starts to help you narrow down how many outfits are you going to need for each day, or at least how many different looks. And that's one of the things that we'll talk about in another one of the workshops is how to create a different look without necessarily having a whole different dress. Because especially with 1840s, these dresses were one piece, like connected the skirt and the bodice. And that's a lot of dresses if I wanted a different dress for each thing. So I would have to have 1 to at least 4 different dresses if I wanted a completely different dress for each one, which is a lot of dresses. So that's what I'm going to be talking about is how to like change up your accessories and different things to wear the same dress, but create a really different look. So today we are doing the mood board and the color palette. We're going to start with your mood board. So this is your chance to dream of all pretty things. The mood board is always my fun part because then I get to just go find all those pretty pictures that have been catching my eye and put them all together. So collect any images of extant dresses, fashion plates, artwork. And then you can also include things like undergarments, shoes, hairstyles, hats, bonnets, accessories. Obviously, like we talked about last week, you want to keep in mind like your purpose and what events and activities you're going to be doing as you collect these images. So like if you're not going to be doing a ball, you might not want to pin a bunch of images of ball gowns because that's not going to work out in the next step of the process. But try to pick things that will work for the events that you're going to do. My favorite way to do this is to use Pinterest. It's my absolute favorite. I not only use the images that are already there, but I also will create my own. So it's super easy to just create a pin. And so if I see an image, say on Facebook or on Instagram or somewhere, I'll save that image and then just upload it as a pin. Or if I find a link, like a new place to buy fabric that I hadn't heard of before, a new place to buy historical shoes, I'll just create a pin from that link and keep it in the boards. And since all of mine is inspired by literary characters, my boards are organized by literary characters. So you can see like Amy March, Anne of Green Gables, Caroline Bingley. So I kind of save different ideas that go with each character. You can also do digitally, which I created these slides that I'm using right now through Canva, and Canva is free. You can usually just connect it through your Google account. So you can just create a free account through Google. And then you just upload your images, or you can connect your Google Photos if the images are already in Google Photos, and then just put them in that way. And there's all kinds of fun templates and different sizes, and you can arrange them all kinds of different ways. You can also just put them in a Google document and put them in there. Of course, you can always go old school and do paper. You have to obviously have the ability to print with this, which I like mine to be in color, and I don't have a color printer, which is why I usually opt for an online or digital version of a mood board. But you can, of course, print your images and then cut and paste them on the page in your workbook that you downloaded, or cut and paste them on a big, any kind of big poster board or workbook or any kind of thing that you have where you want to be able to see them. So here's a couple of examples that I couldn't resist putting together for you guys. So this is the 1790s. Last fall, I went to a 1790s event with costumers of color. It was inspired by the Chevalier movie that came out. Was that 2 years ago that came out? I don't remember exactly, but it was inspired by that. So she had an afternoon full of like lectures and visiting, and then the evening was super cool because it was a ball, but it also had a ton of other activities to do. Like there was a game room, there was a photography studio, there was a lady there showing you how to do like period embroidery by the fireplace. So I needed an outfit for the afternoon, and I needed an outfit for the evening. So these were some of the images that I collected. And of course, keeping in mind that Pride and Prejudice was drafted in 1796 and 1797. So this is what Austen would have been wearing around that time when she was drafting Pride and Prejudice. As you can see, I also had to throw in one image of Elizabeth Bennet from the 2005 Pride and Prejudice version, which is my favorite version of my favorite production of her work, Pride and Prejudice. And so one of my dresses was heavily inspired by that. But I was looking to like ways to mix and match things. So like I put some open robes on there. I put some day dresses. Of course, I wanted a cloak to keep warm because it was October in Seattle. So it was a lot chillier there than it is down here. So those are some of the things I pinned for that. For Regency, this is actually a couple of years ago. Ayana of the Vintage Guidebook, who was with us last week on here, I created a capsule wardrobe for her, heavily inspired by Georgiana Lamb from Sanditon, and not only the written work, but also the TV series that came out about it. And so these were some of the inspiration images that we used for that when we created her Regency capsule wardrobe. And I typically stop with Regency about 1817, which is when Austen passed, just because honestly, I don't really care a lot for the fashion after 1817, especially not the 1820s, but also just because my stuff is heavily inspired by her, I tend to stick with those years. This was a very pastel one that we put together for her. So you can see that in the colors. They're very pastel. This is my 1840s one that I talked about last week that I am trying to work on this year. Lots of fan dresses. This ball gown right here in the center is one of the major pieces I want to make as part of that wardrobe. But a lot of fan dresses. I already have a black Victorian cloak that I've made for that era. And then I was trying to find ways to create more mix and match in the 1840s because a lot of their dresses were one piece. So you can't really mix the skirts with other bodices or anything. But I was recently reading and started finding fashion plates that show this example here, which is where they started wearing these longer jackets with just a skirt. So that gives a little more ability to mix and match. So that's something to keep in mind when you're creating these too, is like, what could I mix and match? So like here, the reason I picked this picture is you can see her colorful petticoat underneath her white dress, but then you can also take that petticoat and put it on top of the dress like you see in these pictures here. So that creates another outfit very easily. You can also put it over a chemisette that has sleeves or a habit shirt if you don't want to put it over your dress. So things like that create more ability for mixing and matching. And then finally 1860s, which is the other era that I tend to costume from. By that point, the bodices and the skirts were made separately. So it's a lot easier to mix and match in this period. And they also started coming out with what was called a Garibaldi shirtwaist and skirts, which were not really seen up until the 1860s. I know there's a lot of Victorian movies that wear them sooner, but they really didn't appear until the 1860s. So this is some of the stuff that I already have made and some stuff that I would like to add to it. You can see here and also here, you can have like two different bodices, but the same skirt. These are not exactly the same, but these two are. And so then that creates a day look and an evening look. So anything that mixes and matches. And don't forget things like outerwear. If it is going to be cold or cool, you're going to need any kind of outerwear. So I pulled together a couple of different resources for this. There's a couple of bloggers who've done a really good job. They went through the magazines of the time, and the descriptions underneath the plates a lot of times would tell the colors being used in the examples. And so they have made a list. If you're going to narrow your focus, like the 1790s, or you're going more like Bridgerton era, 1811, 1812, 1813. And then for the Victorian era, 1840s was to use a popular word, a very demure era, very simplistic in fashion and very muted colors. So if you were married, you wore a lot of black. And then if you didn't wear black, or if you were unmarried, you wore a lot of somber or soft pastel tints. So dull green, gray, pink, pale blue, mauve, lemon. And then for evenings, you would wear creamy white. You could wear creamy white or one of those other colors. Patterned wools and silks. So anything with a pattern on it. Of course, this was after roller printing had been invented. And then shot silks were popular. And that's what that dress was I was showing you in the 1840s. This is a shot silk. So they take two different colors of thread and one goes this way, one's the warp and one's the weft. And so depending on how it catches the light, it appears slightly different. So those were really popular during the 1840s. And then by the 1850s and 1860s, synthetic dyes had been invented in 1856. So bright colors were super popular because they could actually wear something that was a bright color. The price was reasonable because, previously the few brighter colors they had were more expensive because they were so hard to do. So there was lots of bright blues, deep purples, magentas, vivid greens. Of course, we always hear about the green that was deadly to wear, had arsenic in it. And if you look, like you can see even here, you've got the bright purple, you've got the reds. And then if you're looking for other eras outside of these eras, which are not my area of expertise, like I said, I just start reading books and start perusing blogs. So like the Regency ones I pulled off of blogs. The 1840s, 1850s, and 1860s were actually two books that I was reading this week about Victorian fashion. They're just not very big books. They're like 100 pages or less. And they kind of the one gives an overview of fashion throughout the Victorian era. And the other one gives an overview of like how clothes were made during that era. And so any kind of generic book like that will start to give you a feel for the colors as well. For like a capsule wardrobe for a weekend, I really usually only pick two main colors. So my 1860s is burgundy and gold. My 1790s was plum and brown. And then you want to pick up to 4 accent colors. These are things you're going to use for like sashes, hair accessories, reticules, shawls, maybe even your outerwear. So like with my 1790s capsule wardrobe, I did red because my cloak was red, because they had so many red cloaks back then. And then gold was one of the other accent colors. And I actually forgot to put this on the slide, but I used a dark green, like a hunter green as well. And then your neutral colors usually, well, no, that's not true. I was going to say they usually are for like your shoes and stuff, your shoes, your bonnets and stuff, but not necessarily, because if you pick a white, you might use that as a dress. You might use that as a blouse. So it's not just for your shoes and bonnets and stuff. It may also be for part of your actual wardrobe. And the checklist is there in your planner, like all the different colors. And obviously you can add other colors as well, but those were the main colors that I came up with. I just kind of tend to cross-reference like what was popular / accepted to wear then with what colors do I like to wear and look good on me. So here is an example one. This is once again my 1790s. And here's some photos of me wearing it. So you can see the purple. I didn't actually wear it over the white dress because I was fudging it for a historical witch party that we did. This is the purple silk petticoat that I'm wearing underneath this dress here with the matching purple sash and the purple hair ribbon here. You can't see it really, but this white is from Renaissance Fabric and it has a rose gold stripe in it. So that's where the gold accent came in. And this is based on an original 1790s dress in The Cut of Women's Clothes by Nora Waugh, this dress right here. And then this is the one, as I'm sure you can tell, is heavily inspired by Elizabeth Bennet's dress from the 2005 production, but it's a historically accurate brown gown. And this is made of a brown Swiss dot lawn, so spotted cotton as they would have called it. And so you can see my two main colors were the plum color and the dark brown. And then this is the closest I could get to the gold. The gold is not actually this color, but it's hard to pick a color for gold. I have this dark green shawl that I wear with it sometimes to accessorize. I don't have a picture, but I have a red cloak that I wear with it if it's cold. And then my shoes that I wear with it are this tan color, except my ball shoes are white, but my like everyday shoes are a tan boot. And then, of course, the white for the dress, the tan in the hat, all of those different things for my neutral colors. So that kind of helps you see how it works. Any questions on picking your color palette? If you're wanting like a big wardrobe, like you're going to Jane Austen Festival, you're going to be there like all week or whatever, you know, you might need more colors, but most of my events so far have just been like 3-day events. And so I don't ever really need more than the colors that I've got on there. I really only need 2 main colors, 1 or 2 neutrals, and 2 or 3 accents. So today we're going to look at designing your looks. Today you have to make your decisions, more decisions. Last week you started to make decisions with colors. You need to just choose your main garments for your capsule wardrobe. So for a weekend event, like a 3-day event, I recommend 3 main garments. So some examples of main garments would be a Regency dress, a Regency colorful petticoat, a 2-piece mid-Victorian dress with the bodice plus a skirt that they started wearing a lot during the 1850s, 1860s onward, or a 1-piece 1840s dress. Ideally, you want to be able to mix and match these pieces in some way. So like having a 2-piece mid-Victorian dress is really handy. Having the Regency colorful petticoat is super handy because we've talked about how you can put it under a dress, but also over a dress. Things that you could, you know, possibly mix and match are handy. This was my 1790s that I designed. I haven't completely finished this little capsule wardrobe, but I've got a good start on it. So you can see the plum silk colorful petticoat here. I'm wearing it here underneath the white gown with a matching sash and a matching hair ribbon. I actually don't show it on this, but you can also put the petticoat on top of the white gown for a different look. And you see that in a lot of fashion plates. You'll see the white of their gown underneath the bottom with the sleeves and the neckline showing out of the top of the colorful petticoat. And then you can see the brown round gown that I have, and I wore this one 2 different ways. Here you can see it a little more plainly done with, you know, just the actual dress. And then here I put the scarf on it and the shawl and put the hat with it to make it a completely different look. So that's for 1790s. For Regency, once again, the colorful petticoat. Here she put a habit shirt underneath it. Instead of putting it over a dress. So that's another way you can do it. But if you want to cut an extra piece out of your wardrobe, you can, like I said, put it over the dress instead of having a separate habit shirt. And then you can see how she's wearing the colorful petticoat underneath her dress down in that bottom corner. And then you have the white dress for evening wear, and then the pink dress for, you know, day wear and morning or afternoon wear. And then for 1860s, I like to make the separate bodices and skirts, and you can mix and match those. So you can see on the left side, I have the navy plaid dress, and it has a bodice that matches. And then it has a red Garibaldi shirtwaist or blouse with the Spanish or Zouave jacket. And then on the right side, you can see the burgundy and gold gown, and it has a day bodice, most appropriate for afternoon wear, and then the ball bodice that I can wear for. So then once you kind of picked those main pieces, then you're going to start brainstorming your accessories. And you want to go back to your purpose again and think about what we created in our first workshop with your event at a glance, your different activities that you're doing each day. And you want to think about, okay, what looks am I creating? Am I going for a morning look, a working class look, an afternoon tea look, a ball look, you know, all of those different things. And then start thinking about how am I going to accessorize this dress so that it looks specific for this event, even if I wear the dress again with different accessories for a different event on the same weekend. So think about your hats, bonnets, and hair accessories. You can see 2 different hat examples here. Obviously, there is bonnets and hats galore throughout the 19th century. Don't also forget like hair ribbons for evening wear. Those are really fun. Decorative combs you can do that have pearls, flowers on them. In the Victorian period, they had the horn combs, which I don't think I have any pictures. I have one that I have in some of my photos that I wear for evening wear sometimes. So those are all fun accessories. Caps were a very common thing for women of married age to wear indoors usually. They would wear them, and then if you went outdoors, you would put your bonnet on top of them. And there's so many fantastic caps throughout the 19th century. There's all kinds of fun and unique and crazy looking ones, so you can find one that suits your fancy because there is every style available out there. You want to think about anything to fill in the neckline. So throughout the 19th century, I mean, this is true even in the 18th century, they had different things to fill in the necklines. Of course, Regency, this was super important because their necklines were so low. So during the day, they would have scarves, chemisettes, fichus, all of those things a lot of times to fill in the necklines. As they moved into the Victorian period, you started to see pearlines. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that correctly. I need to look up the pronunciation for that. And then they still had things like, you can see even in this photo here, she's got a chemisette on. They still had chemisettes during that era as well. So anything to fill in the neckline, as you could see in my 1790s example, you can wear them on top or underneath. So like here, I've got the scarf worn on top, or you can tuck it in the neckline and wear it underneath. And that's another fun way to give a little bit of a different look, because if you wear it on top versus underneath, it's going to be a different look. So that's an easy way to change up your look. And then of course, gloves. You didn't go out without your gloves. And there's all kinds of gloves depending on what your time of day is, what your era is. If you're wearing the long ones that go to your elbow or past your elbow, you're wearing the short ones that go to your wrist, you're wearing the lace ones like she's wearing here in this picture, you're wearing leather ones, you're wearing, cotton ones. There was so many different types. So there's a lot of different options there too, to be creative with. Regency sashes are actually really fun. A lot of people tend to just wear them in one way, tied in the back. But if you look at original fashion plates, they were worn all kinds of different ways. Sometimes they were tied in the front, like I'm wearing mine tied in the front here. They also would crisscross them up over their shoulders and wear them different ways. If you look at fashion plates to style your sash, that will create a different look. Jewelry, earrings, and necklaces were most commonly worn. If you look back at original art and fashion plates and photos, so those are definitely always something that you can add to your accessories, is especially for evening wear, your earrings and your necklaces. That'll add a whole new dimension. And then of course, don't forget your shoes and your stockings. You can see my boots there for my 1872 dress. Think about your weather and your activity. So stockings came in cotton and silk and wool. So kind of think about those based on the weather and activity you're doing. And then also your shoes based on what you're doing. Obviously, if you're doing a working class look, which I did the other night, I went and gave a talk on pioneer fashion. And I wore flat boots instead of heel boots for the 1860s, because obviously pioneer women were not wearing heel boots as they were working around their settlement during the day. And of course, don't forget your garters. There is, of course, the fun ones that are embroidered that you see throughout the 18th and early 19th century. You can do just plain ribbon for them. I actually am just now ordering a pair of knitted ones for the Victorian era that are based on directions from Godey's Ladies Magazine. So don't forget your garters, because otherwise your stockings won't stay up. I mean, ours might because they have elastic in them, but theirs wouldn't have. Don't forget about your outerwear. So your cloaks, your capes. Forgot to put shawls on here as well. Shawls you can do even when it's not quite as cold, if you're going to a ball and you just want a little extra to add to your outfit. Of course, during the Regency, you had the police's redingotes and spencers. During Victorian, you had paletotes and dolmans. And then, of course, your furs, your collars, your muffs, and all of those things to help keep you warm. When you create each look, so this is what I have a bunch of pages for in the workbook, go ahead and circle what activity. So like, for example, this one was for a 1790s afternoon picnic outside in the fall. So then you want to list all the items you're going to need to wear. I've got my shift, I've got my stays, my petticoat, my stockings with my garters, my boots, my round gown, my scarf, my shawl, and my bergère. And then you want to use that to make your shopping list. So obviously, if you already have stuff, you can put little like check marks or whatever beside it to show that you have it. And then the rest you can use to be like, okay, I need to still look for these things to create that look. I like to sketch the little, I'm not an artist. Like I take that back. I'm not good at drawing. We'll put it that way. I am an artist with a needle and thread, but I am not an artist when it comes to drawing. But I still will do like a rough sketch at least to kind of see how the whole thing is going to look together. That's why I put those pages in the book. And then, of course, it gives you plenty of space to list stuff out, to staple fabric scraps you have for ideas or sample pictures of inspiration pictures and all of those things. And then I put the calendar pages at the end so that you can kind of chart out. It's kind of like we were talking about the first week. You really need to give, if somebody's making you something to measure, you got to give them, at least 2 or 3 months. Usually most makers, that's about how long their queue is. So just kind of chart it out on a calendar so that you can make sure you kind of get it all in time for your event.